नहीं अभी टाइम ही नहीं हुआ था ना. Sarthak sir, now we start.
Yes, sir. You may, sir. Please proceed.
Welcome to all attendees in this wonderful web platform of the Vivek College Bijnor. Vivek College Bijnor continuously today we complete the 4-month completed approximately 110 webinars on this platform. So welcome to all. Welcome to the all teachers of the different college and universities, dignitaries from different institutions, and all students who are present over here. Today webinar, we invite a very enthusiastic personality, Dr. M. Ojit Kumar Singh from Department of Zoology, Ramjas College, University of Delhi. He is not a teacher. He is not only a teacher. He is not only a ecologist, but he is much more than it. He have a dynamic personality, a magnified personality, and also the different magnitudes of the science, especially the area of biology. Sir, Ojit sir got their MPhil from Zoology Department of Delhi University, the Laboratory of Insect Plant Interaction Laboratory of Zoology Department of the University of Delhi, and after that he got his PhD from at the School of Human Ecology. He has been interested in the various ways which are belonging to the ecology, biodiversity, biostudy in the field of the insect and the behavior of the insect especially. He has been contributed article on biodiversity and climate change in national dailies. He regularly write up and approximately 400 essays on climate change and biodiversity published till now. He interested in the ecology of insect and human culture, the insects ecosystem and insect service for the ecosystem, the wildlife, and also write poem in Manipuri, belongs to the Manipur, and live in the NCR. And now I invite Dr. M. Ojit Kumar Singh for a talk on the ecology, ecosystem, sustainability, and ultimately the life, like our life. Please welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction. I hope, sir, I'm audible to all the audience, right? I hope I'm
yes,
audible.
Sir.
Okay.
Voice is clear and video is so clear.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for. I will request all the participants to mute so that there is no echoing in between. And if at any point of time you want to clarify something, please stop me in between. Thank you so much. This is my first visit to an online visit to Bijnor, and especially the Vivek group of colleges. And thank you so much, Dr. BP Singh from Dayal Singh College, Delhi University, who introduced me to the principal, Tyagi sir. And Dr. Tyagi, we are meeting for the first time, but the kind of benevolence, the kind of kindness and the hospitality that sir has given to me during the whole process of making this particular program successful is wonderful. I will try today to share a very interesting topic on biological diversity and the sustainable development, how these particular two terms are linked together. Thank you so much for the Vivek group of colleges for giving me this opportunity to share something which I strongly adopt and I love doing it. Today I will try to control my emotions in the subject, but rather will try to put and will try to problematize what is biological diversity and how is it linked with the sustainable development. Why is it said that development or the sustainable development and the respective goals of the United Nations as far as the sustainable development goal is concerned, how these particular goals are placed or are linked with the biological diversity, and why biological diversity should be mainstream. So this is the broad objective of today's discussion. I'm not an expert, but I am a true lover of the nature, and the biological diversity always keep on intriguing me before also, and now also, and in the future also. I truly believe that this is something that will surely intrigue every one of us. So if everything goes well, then please give all the credits to the principal, Dr. Tyagi, and the team, Vivek group of colleges. And if something miss out, I'll take all the responsibility if something bad happens. Anyway, today I will be not going into details of the case studies because of the paucity of time. Rather, I would try to share some of the images which will be really be useful to connect ourselves with the biological diversity and sustainable development. So this particular slide presentation will be composing mainly of three sub topics. One, we'll try to introduce ourselves. What is biological diversity? Everyone talks about biodiversity, but what is biodiversity? How can a layperson or the layman can understand biological diversity? Then I'll try to talk about what is sustainable development and side by side with the biological diversity. And at last, I'll propose in front of every one of us why this is important and why should we be taking care of the biological diversity from now onwards to achieve the goal. So these are the three broad objectives or the major questions that we'll try to answer. So I'll start sharing my slides. Before we start sharing our slides, every participants who are here in this particular online platform will realize that sitting in this particular room, sitting and talking to you, sitting and watching you, or sitting and listening you will not be possible without having our breakfast or lunch or dinner. But if you talk about your breakfast, lunch and dinner directly or indirectly, the things that we have consumed is coming from the plants and animals that surround us. So if the food items that we have consumed is sustaining us, is allowing us to do our activities, then can I say that biological diversity or our surrounding plants and animals are our lives? Indeed, it is true that our life is quite impossible without biological diversity or without our dependence on the plants and animals and the other organisms that surround us. So with this, I would like to share the slides now. May I request Vivek sir or Sarthak sir, is the slide visible visible in your screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, visible.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry because I need to disturb off and on because sometimes I miss out. So today's topic, which is given and also selected by me, was biological diversity for sustainable development. So biological diversity or the biodiversity for sustainable development is a term that was framed as one of the agenda in the recent meeting of Convention on Biological Diversity. So we are very focused today. Biological diversity is so huge and so majestic and so alarmingly large, And here we are going to point ourselves, we are going to put our spotlight on one of the interesting terms, which is as contemporary as it is, and the challenges and opportunity. For example, suppose this, let's say that this is our home or this is our village. The moment you come out of your home, the moment we come out of our house, or you go to your garden, everywhere is surrounded by living organisms. It may be the living organism, or it might be once a living organism, but now is laying for us to get it burned. For example, the dried wood is also, and the grains, the rice grains that we depend on, is all a biological diversity. The beautiful flowers that adorn your garden, the trees and the vines that surrounds you is the biological diversity. So our surrounding, the moment we come out of our home, suppose for example, people like me who is an urban migrant now because of the job, I am right now in Delhi, and in Delhi there is a less of biological diversity, but I'm lucky enough that when I get out of my room early in the morning, I can listen the chirping of the birds, even though I don't see them. That means that I am being surrounded by living organisms. I can see a small park in front of my house, and I can see seasonal flowers blooming there. That is biological diversity. What I want to share with you all is biological diversity is very close to us. The moment we get out of the house, the moment we get up, we are already surrounded by biological diversity. Different forms of plants, different forms of animals, seeing, visible and invisible. You can only listen. That is also the biological diversity. For example, if you go to the field, suppose if you ever go to the field, the rice field, or this is a wheat field, it's a very beautiful painting drawn by Vincent van Gogh. So when you go to the field also, your field is surrounded by agrobiodiversity. There are rice plant, there is a wheat plant, paddy, then we have the birds coming there to graze on the grains or to try to control the larvae of the insect pests. This is biological diversity. And if you're lucky enough, you can also get different varieties of fishes that is there in your agricultural field. That is also the biological diversity. Then you talk to any of the very scenic, beautiful farmhouses or the slope of the hill, you go there, you will surely find lots of living organisms, trees, the wild herbs, the wild flowers, and so on and so forth. This is biological diversity. If you happen to go to any of the lily ponds, you find a lot of dragonflies, you find a lot of fishes, you find a lot of colorful lilies and lotuses. This is biological diversity. And without this particular diverse forms of life, the lives that we owned might have been so dull, and it might be having less beauty that we observe and we sense. Then if you happen to go to the kitchen, in the kitchen, whatever things that we are consuming is directly or indirectly coming from the biological diversity. For example, you might be saying that, no, I'm eating Maggi or the noodles, or I'm eating the bread. But what is a bread, by the way? The bread was once upon a time a flour. And what is a flour? A flour is nothing but ground from the wheat grains that you have collected or harvested from the agricultural field. So wherever we are, you come outside the house, you go inside the house, you go to your office, you go to your playground, everywhere biological diversity surround us. So biological diversity is mainly classified under 3 categories. And when we talk about the biological diversity, the short form of which is called biodiversity. So the biological diversity is the term which have been given long time ago, but the term biodiversity is very new. And it is thanks because of one particular scholars and one of the great activists of our time, and he is none other than Edward Osborne Wilson. He is presently teaching in the Harvard, and he has been one of the pioneers who popularized the term biological diversity. So the biological diversity, he contracted into what is called as biodiversity. Today, the biodiversity is rather a more common word. So when we talk about the biodiversity, the different forms of living organisms, many of us who have gone through the 12th standard textbook or any NCERT book or any of the state board book, we know from the basic biology that there are more than 2 million different groups of organisms in the world. But all these particular organisms cannot be remembered by one person easily. So what what I'm trying to share with you is a simple classification of the biodiversity into three categories. Biological diversity can be categorized in the form of the species. The species means different groups. For example, here you see the grasshopper, which is different from the dragonfly. The dragonfly is different from the water beetles, which you see in the picture on the right corner. Then it is different from many of the moths, many of the larvae. It is different from the wood lice, which is in the lower portion. It's different from the beetles. So different, for example, a tiger is not a leopard. A leopard is not a lion. A lion is different from the crocodile, and the crocodiles are not human. So this different species is also one of the categories of the biological diversity, and it is called as the species category of biological diversity. The level of biological diversity here is called as a species level. The next one is in the genetic level. For example, if you look at this picture, these are all kinds of grasshoppers belonging to a similar families. But why do we find so much of the different diversity? It is because of the gene. For example, I'm having two of my brothers and sisters. We all come from the same parents, but the genetic makeup of mine is only half of my parents, and my sister is having only half from each of the parents, and is becoming a complete one. So if I do compare the genetic makeup of me and my sister, we are going to have a different gene. Same is the case. It is because of the presence of the different genomic constituents that even in the same species, we find different categories of different or seemingly very different groups. So the second level of the biological diversity can be called as the genetic level. So the first one is the species level, and the second one is the genetic level. In the common parlance, when we talk about the biological diversity, we always associate with the species diversity. But please remember, when we talk about the biodiversity, it also includes the genetic level differences. Then we have this particular level of biological diversity, which is called as a habitat level of biological diversity. For example, this particular grassland can be found in the mountainous region. The grasshoppers are found in the Thari deserts of Gujarat and Rajasthan. It is found in the deserts of Pakistan. It is found in the deserts of Africa. It is found in the mountainous regions of the northeastern region also. So when we look at the grasshoppers is going to be found not only in one particular locations, but in different many regions where it can adapt to. So this is what is called as the habitat levels of biological diversity. For example, we have the majestic Himalaya, and we also at the same time have a wonderful Western Ghat. If I go, for example, 500 meters above the sea level in the Western Ghat, and I go 500 meters above the mean sea level in the Himalaya, I'm sure that the kind of diversity, the kind of landscape, the kind of climatic conditions in the 500 meters above this mean sea level, both in the Himalaya and the Western Ghat, they are not going to be similar. They are going to be different. A very interesting anecdotal story is that of the question given by Ruskin Bond. He said very interestingly, he's asking to the students, he's asking to the young children that we happen to find that the polar bears are found eating penguins. I'm sorry, polar bears are found eating birds, but polar bears are never found eating penguins. Why? The basic reasons, the ultimate reason, the important reason why the polar bears are not eating the penguin is both of them are found in the different poles of the earth. For example, the polar bears are found in the northern pole and the penguins are found in the southern pole. If a particular polar bear wants to eat a particular penguin in Antarctica, then he has to come all the way from the northern pole to the southern pole. And biologically, physiologically, anatomically, this particular bear will not be able to come to the South Pole by itself, because not only he has to negotiate with the predators, with the other competitors, but also the sheer climatic differences is going to kill that particular animal. So both of them are adapted to different regions, and both of them are unable to meet each other. So what I want to say is, when I talk about the biological diversity, it is not only about the species, it's not only about the dissimilarity among the children of the same parents, but it is also the different forms or different kinds of environment that we see is also called as a biological diversity. For example, we said that it's an aquatic ecosystem, for example, the rivers, the lake, or for the ocean. And we will say that a particular ecosystem is called as a mangroves if it is mainly decorated by the dominant species, which are mainly represented by the mangrove trees. And when we talk about a particular ecosystem, like for example, desert, which is going to be so different from what we find in the tropical rainforest. So basically, biological diversity, the different forms of living organisms, the different genomes that we find, and also the different habitats we see all over the world constitute what we call as the biological diversity. From today onwards, when we talk about the biological diversity, let us also explore and let us also extend our vision not only to the certain different groups of organisms, but also to the places where they are found. So these are the categories of biological diversity. So we see the habitat. For example, you'll see this beautiful paintings of the southern America landscape, and the Andes mountain is an example of an ecosystem diversity, or is also an example of biological diversity. And if you look at the paintings of the tropical rainforest of the Russia, so it's so diverse. So if you happen to go to the tropical rainforest, you will find in 1 square kilometer so many different kinds of organisms, so much of the biodiversity, which I may not be able to find in the 100 square kilometers in the open ocean, or for example, in a desert. So these places in the world, or such places in the world, where you find amazingly diverse forms of living organisms, is what we call as the hotspots. So there are near about 35 biodiversity hotspots in the world, and biodiversity hotspots are those particular places, those habitats, where in a certain given area you will find tremendous variety of living organisms living there. And luckily in India, we have not only one. India is associated with the biological diversity hotspots. So for example, we have the Eastern Himalaya, we have the Northeastern regions, we have Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspots, then we have the Western Ghat and Sri Lankan biodiversity hotspots, and then we have a hotspots in the Kara-Nicobar group of islands, which is associated with the other Southeast Asian countries. So we have a huge biological diversity in the country, and this biological diversity is also being hosted in some of the very important hotspots of the world. So hotspots, when we talk about it, is not only in the levels of forests, but also if you happen to go to the Great Barrier Reefs or the coral reefs, these are also some places in the warm tropical oceans of the world where in a certain region you find lots and lots of diversity of organisms. For example, when we talk about the Great Barrier Reefs of Australia, is colonies and colonies of the coral polyps associated with the zooxanthellae, and it is such a beautiful homes for different groups of organisms, which is quite unimaginable when we talk about the other parts of the oceans. So these are called as the biodiversity hotspots. And biodiversity hotspots are also one of the important reservoir of many of the living organisms on which human depend for the livelihoods, human depends for medicine, human depends for many, many activities. So they also provide a lot of economic, lot of societal value, lot of cultural value. So biodiversity hotspots, today we have 35 biodiversity hotspots. Now, the second category, in order to associate ourselves with the biodiversity for sustainable development, let me also tell you a short story on some of the importances or some of the benefits that we derive from biological diversity. So the benefits that we human beings derive from the biological diversity, remember when we talk about the biological diversity, here I'm talking about the genetic diversity, here I'm talking about the species diversity, here I'm talking about the ecosystem diversity also. There are 3 levels of biological diversity that we have just seen. So when you accommodate all these diverse categories of biological diversity, they provide benefits to us. Here I'm using the word us, which means humans. So in the case of humans, we derive a lot of biological diversity, and thanks because of the erstwhile, now he is no longer living, but one of the very important statesmen of the world, some of you might have already heard about him, called as Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan was the Secretary General of the United Nations. In 2001 to 2004, he came out with a project which tried to value the biological diversity, and he tried to bring out what are the significances, what are the benefits that we derive from biological diversity, right? So according to this particular project, which we call as Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, also called as MEA. Many of my students once happened to write ME as the Ministry of External Affairs. Yes, that is also a correct acronym, but here in the context of biological diversity, MEA means Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. It took near about 3 years with lots of scientists, lot of economists, lot of social scientists come together and came out with this particular finding that biological diversity provide us and lots of services, a lot of importance to us, and Millennium Ecosystems Assessment classified the benefits of biological diversity under 4 categories. The first category is called as a provisioning services. So when we look at this particular wheat field, the chapatis that we have eaten, the noodles that we will be having right now, or some of you might be having right now, is nothing but is derived from the paddy fields, is derived from the wheat fields, right? So our agricultural fields are providing what? Food for us is an example of the provisioning services. Provisioning services of the ecosystem is simply meaning a kind of products or a kind of services which can be counted, which can be felt, which can be consumed. So in the provisioning service, we can talk about the food that we are eating that is derived from the wild plants and animals and also from the agricultural field. And is also talking about the medicines. Okay? So still today, more than 76% of the medicine that we get from the pharmacy is directly coming from the plant and the plant products. The remaining 24% might be a processed one in the pharmaceutical industries. So provisioning, it provides us habitat. For example, when a particular bird wants to make the nest, where does it go? It goes to a particular trunk of the tree and is making the nest there, is going to the branches of the tree and making the nest there. So the nest, for example, is met in a particular tree, which is again an example of the provisioning services. So medicine, you have even the genetic. Okay, in the last, I remember the third lecture series of the Vivek group of school of colleges was on genetic, was on medicines. One of our professors came from Pondicherry University. So when we talk about the BT cotton, can I imagine about the BT cotton without a genetic diversity? So BT cotton is nothing but a genetic makeup that constitute the bacterial genome. You take it out and is incorporated in a particular plant. Taxonomically, one is a bacteria and another one is a plant. But today, because of genetic engineering, you are incorporating the genome of the bacteria and it's becoming a part of a tree or a particular plant, and the plant started exhibiting the behavior of the bacteria. So what I want to say is, when we talk about the genetic improvement of the crops, when we talk about the genetic therapy, can I imagine genetic therapy or genetic improvement of the crop without the provisioning services of the ecosystem, without the provisioning services in the form of gene? Some of the students might argue that how can you be calling the genomic or the genetic, the different genes as a provisioning? Can it be counted? Yes, it is easily countable. It may not be able to be seen by the naked eyes, but you can easily count it. That's the reason why we said that human beings have got 46 chromosomes, and we have there about, say a few thousands of the expressed gene. So it is easily countable. So provisioning services is one advantage that we get it from the ecosystem. And you just remember, agriculture is one particular field of the economy that provides livelihood to so many millions of human beings in the world today. So biological diversity is so much associated with the economy of the humans. So when we talk about sustainable development, can we forego or can we keep in the back burner the agriculture, the timber that we derive from the biological diversity? Absolutely not. Then when we look at the surrounding, let's look at the sunflower garden, for example, or the beautiful gardens you look at. So every plant is performing photosynthesis, and thanks because of this photosynthetic activity that we can have oxygen. In this particular room where I am and is sharing few words on biological diversity to you, is it possible without the oxygen that I derive indirectly from the plant because of their photosynthetic activity happening outside my room. So absolutely, it is not possible. If the plants are not providing oxygen to us, every one of us in this particular class might be having an oxygen cylinder by our side, and somebody will be taking care of, the providing oxygen, okay, cylinders, and if something goes wrong. But thankfully, it is not happening because the plants are doing this particular service of photosynthesis, and it is useful for the production of carbohydrates for the plants and us, and also it is providing oxygen. So what is regulatory services of the ecosystem or the biological diversity means? Regulatory services is not in some kind of a products like you have seen in the provisioning, but these particular services are so important that it regulates in the production of something which is useful. For example, when we talk about the mangroves forest, if the mangrove forests were not present in Andaman and Nicobar Island, the 2004 tsunami in the December night of the Andaman and Nicobar Island might have devastated so much. So it is because of the mangrove forests that surround the coastal area of the Andaman and Nicobar Island, the speed of the tsunami, the speed of the wave, the impact of the disasters was reduced. So that's an example of regulatory services. Today, the regulatory services are so important. Without these regulatory services, many of the beauties and many of this particular moderating, moderating services that we find might have not been there. For example, why do we say that heavy plantations will be responsible for mitigating the climate change? Today, when we talk about the climate change, we are talking about lots of plantations and less of deforestations. How do you associate the climate change and plantation? Because we know that if we do a lot of plantation, it will surely help in sequestering the carbon dioxide of the atmosphere, which is one of the important global warming gas. So plant, while doing the photosynthesis, will absorb the carbon dioxide of the atmosphere and will be releasing oxygen and helps in the purification of the air. So when we talk about the pollution, when we talk about eutrophications, when we talk about the global warming, the regulatory services of the plant is going to help in moderating the climatic extremes. Again, is one of the important services of the biological diversity. For example, many a time when we do the traditional way of farming, we know that many of the birds and many of the insects are acting as the natural controlling agent. That means they are the one which will be feeding on some of the pest varieties. So it reduces our chance of buying a lot of pesticides and also polluting much more. So if we know a particular bird is feeding on a certain larva or a particular insect is feeding on certain insect pests, then we can release those particular natural controlling organisms. So who provides the natural controlling organism is not at the biological diversity, right? So when we go to the fish market, you will surely find that a fish farm which produces the fish is quite costly, and it is also costly to produce. But the fish that is brought by a fisherman from the Yamuna, who rear it, it is the Yamuna River who have reared that fish, and today one person might have gone there and collect the fish and selling. So that particular person have not invested much of the time and money in rearing that particular fish. So our rivers, our lake, our ocean is providing a lot of regulatory services. Then when we talk about the cultural and religious services is also being provided by the biological diversity. When we look at this particular paintings that by one particular English woman long time ago, it's so beautiful to look at. Same is the case, many of us who visited this pious river, when you go to Ganga, when you go to Yamuna, we have a pujan, we pray, we treat them as sacred. We exactly do not know from when did we start this particular particular behavior or the particular rituals of praying and considering it a pious. For example, every Tuesday, many of us see that our mothers, our aunts, our sisters will be going with diya, with the threads, and they will tie the threads around the people's tree on Tuesday. When do we start? We do not know. But remember, the language that we are speaking, the ideas that we are having, the kind of sacredness that we associate with certain plants, certain rivers, certain animals is as old as our human culture. And it might have been generated from the importances of these rivers, this particular plants and animals. And that's how we started appreciating them and started adopting as very close to our religious ethos. For example, in the Hindu marriage, we have a Kanyadan. And in the Kanyadan, what we find is the promise of the young couples in front of the fire god, in front of the plants collected from our surrounding, and you promise that the marriage is solemnized. So the rituals, you go to any parts in the world, many of the rituals, many of the religious activities is in one way or the other associated with our rivers, our ponds, our hills. If you happen to go to the northeastern regions of India, or you talk about the Meitei community where I belong to, in every year we have a religious ceremony of our sacred, we go to the sacred forest, we go to the rivers, and there is an invocation. And one particular priest will be invocating, he will be in trains, will be collecting the water, or will be collecting a particular plant or even a stone, and will be considered as a representative of our court for the 5 days, and we celebrate. And after the 5 days, again, we place that particular things that we have collected from the forest or the riverscape to the same place. So such a sustainable way of celebrating a particular community is very closely associated with the biological diversity that surrounds us. So biological diversity is associated with the culture. For example, when I talk about the Royal Bengal tiger, so it's associated with the Sundarban Delta, but if you happen to go to the Inuits or the Arctic regions and talk to the Eskimos, which is a derogatory term, I should be using the Inuits. If I talk to an Inuits and ask about, have you heard about the Royal Bengal tiger? An 84 years old lady in the Arctic regions might be very confused. He will be saying that there is no animals like that, and it will be something which is coming only in the dream. But the same question, if I ask to the tribals of the Andaman and the tribals of the Sundarban Delta about, have you ever heard of the polar bear? You say that no, the bears are black in color, and there is no bear which is completely white in color. The polar bears can be only imagined in the wildest dream. What I want to say is the language, the idea associated with certain object comes and derived from the object when it is there in the nature. For example, we exactly do not know in the Chinese and in many of the ethnic communities in northeastern region, we have a very strong relationship with the dragons, for example. A dragon is some kind of an animal which produces fire from the mouth. It is just a mythological now, but who knows that before, say, 700 years ago, 2000 years ago, there happened to be a particular animal of that particular nature. It might be a small animal, but is darting out some of the pungent and some gas, which when is reacted with the oxygen of the atmosphere is giving life. It might be quite imaginary now, and people might be thinking that I'm hallucinating, but who knows that at some point of time in the human history, such organisms were present, but because of the habitat loss, because of the land use pattern changes, these organisms are no longer visible. So the language that we have, the culture that we own, the kind of dress that I wear, the kind of food that I have is very much associated with the biological diversity that surrounds us. Then we have the sense of beauty. So when we go to a poppy garden, it's so beautiful to look at. The sense of beauty, the sense of belongingness is also derived from biological diversity. So I am always reminded by the song of Iqbal, Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara. If you happen to listen that particular song, I think the writer is describing the beauty of our nature, of our surrounding. He is comparing with this particular concept that the Britishers at one point of time might be saying that Alps are the most beautiful mountains in the world. Or we can say the River Thames the most beautiful rivers in the world. But Iqbal, who is coming from an aristocrat family, had done a good education in English medium, is now realizing today that when the English is claiming Thames River is most beautiful, please also look at open the window and see we have thousands of rivers which is fed by the melting of the ice of the Himalaya. So we have not only one Thames, we have thousands of such kind of rivers. And then so when we look at many of our surrounding, it gives you the awe, it gives you the inspiration, it gives you the sense of beauty. The fine arts, for example, we have some of these particular paintings 30,000 years ago in the caves of Indonesia and Sulawesi. And also we have seen the paintings on the walls of the caves in France. And that has really depicted that thousands of years ago, people have already observed their surrounding and they derived a pleasure, they derived a sense of beauty, and they drew it on the walls of the paintings in the caves. So biological diversity is very artistic and inspire many of the artists that we have. So this is a very interesting picture. It was clicked, and I downloaded from one of the websites of Manipur, where beautiful pictures are shared by many of our colleagues. This is one particular ceremony that happens, and this is a ceremony where the boat racing will be taking place. And the boat racings are not taking place in the swimming pool. They are not taking place in the Sport Authority of India's, some sporting complex. It is happened in a certain river. It is happened in a certain ponds of the royal family at some point of time, but today it's mainly held in the local rivers. So it is a very religious, and it is forbidden. The children are said that you must not eat amla or the gooseberry until and unless this particular ceremony is conducted. That's the kind of the associatedness that we have with our rivers, with this particular celebration of boat race. For example, if you happen to see the boat race in some of the ceremony, in some of the celebrations in Kerala, that particular ceremony is also done in a certain region of Kerala. It's not happening everywhere else. It is happening in a certain locations. So what I can say is biological diversity not only gives you the sense of belongingness, it is also an expression or the symbol of idea and the symbol of identity. So biological diversity is also our identity. That's why we happen to say that tiger is our national animal, peacock is our national bird, lotus is our national flower. It is having certain kind of identity. So in a multi-ethnic society, in the northeastern region and in many forested communities all over the world, biological diversity, a snake, an insect, or any kind of sentient creatures can be an identity. For example, if you happen to look at the totems, we find a lot of significant use of biological diversity as a symbol, as an identity. So last but not the least, biological diversity also provides supporting services. So it provides soil to us, it provides primary productivity to us. Soil, which is the foundation of all the forests, which is the foundation of all the living community, is also a part, is also a services that we derive from the biological diversity. So please remember, we have already covered what is biological diversity and what is the importance of biological diversity, or what are the benefits that we derive from biodiversity. So let me just remind you, we have 4 important services that we derive from biological diversity with a lot of case studies and examples. The first one is we have provisioning services, we have the regulatory services, and we also have cultural services and the supporting services. So these are the benefits. Now with this particular tools at hand, you can easily preempt, you can easily argue that sustainable development, which is about life, which is about a secure future, cannot be established without having the knowledge, awareness, and without protecting the biological diversity that we have discussed right now. So it was in 2004 in the Conference of Parties to the United States, United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, also called as CBD. So the Convention on Biological Diversity in 2004 was held in Korea in Pyeongchang, and this particular convention, this particular conference of parties make it mandatory, requested all the 193 countries who were part of that particular conference that biological diversity should be considered for sustainable development, or any kind of United Nations development agenda. We must mainstream, we must include biological diversity. This was held in Pyeongchang. We call by Gangwon declarations. We have Declaration 12, so and so forth. So in 2004, it was already preempted that United Nations comes out with any kind of developmental agenda post 2015, then we should be incorporating biological diversity. Exactly, it happens in the September of 2015, when the Sustainable Development Goals that replaced the Millennium Development Goal of the United Nations came in September 2015. There were 17 of these particular goals, And in each of the goals, we have tried to incorporate and mainstream and include biological diversity. So let us use the concept of biological diversity. Let us use the tools of the importance of biological diversity that we have discussed and try to apply in understanding the sustainable development goal of every one of us. So these are the 17 development goals. Very briefly, the first one is about no poverty. Second one is zero hunger. The third one is good health and well-being. The fourth one is quality education. Then fifth one is gender equality. The sixth one is clean water and sanitation. The seventh, affordable and clean energy. Eight, decent work and economic growth. Nine, industry, innovation and infrastructure. The 10th one is reduce inequalities. The 11th one is sustainable cities and communities. The 12th one is responsible consumption and production. The 13th one is climate action. 14th, life below water. The 15th one is life on land. The 16th, peace, justice, and strong institution. And 17th is partnership for the goals. These are the 17 important goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. And in each of these particular goals, there is a lot of importances to mainstream biological diversity. In the 2030, the Biological Diversity and Sustainable Development Agenda, some of these particular goals are missing to be elaborated, like goal number 4, 7, and 10 may not be directly talking about the biological diversity, but in that particular case also, we can take the stain of biological diversity to mainstream. For example, the goal 1 is talking about to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. We'll not go into the details of it, but please remember the more than 50% of the people in our country is depending on agriculture. And agriculture that on which we are depending is not a large scale, the agriculture, it's a small marginalized communities holding small piece of land, and many of the incidents, many of the farmers who are depending on agricultural activities are not having their own ownership of the land. But at the same time, maximum population of the country is depending on biological diversity. So if you want to end the poverty, then you have to take care of the agriculture. And if you have to take care of the agriculture, then you'll be taking about how to increase the productivity and who are the people who are getting employed there and how to improve the status or the economic conditions of them. So here comes the importance of agrobiodiversity. Here comes the importance of the fisheries, which is depending on the coral fishing, which is depending on the fishing, the local people fishing in the local rivers, the group of people, poor people in the coastal regions, depending on the fishing with the help of, say, for example, canoes and small holdings of them. So the goal 1, if you want to end the poverty, then we also have to mainstream the biological diversity, how it is associated with the lives of people. For example, the livelihood of a particular group of people who depends on the collection of the wildflowers and the wild plants and the wild nectars from the forest and giving to the dealer, and then is getting some money out of it because of the pharmaceutical industries, because of Ayurveda. Nowadays, we have alternative medicines, Ayush, for example, and it is heavily depending on the locally derived biological diversities. So the people who are directly involved in it, we need to mainstream. So whenever we talk about the development activities, we need to situate biological diversity in a very secure manner. When we talk about the goal 2, it is about end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, for example. Many of the people in the world, we have near about 7.5 billion human populations, and majority of the people is still depending on the local orchards and the locally derived. So if we need to improve the health, if we need to remove the hunger, if we need to improve the nutrition security, then we again need to take care of the biological diversity that we have. Somebody might be arguing that why should a particular person be going to the jungle or the forest or the agrobiodiversity to derive the nutrition when you can get the good day biscuit at 10 rupees and easily it's available in every shop. The taste might be good, the calories might be good, the kind of delicacy, the kind of linkages that the local food have to a particular community cannot be replaced by something that you buy from the grocery shop very easily. So This has to be taken care of. Then the goal number 3 is ensure the healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Again, here is talking about the importance of biological diversity. Just remember, 1 in 4 deaths in the world today is in one way or the other associated with the environmental, okay, factors. So it is because of pollution. Maximum number of children are dying today, not because of some kind of communicable diseases, but because of the environmental bad impacts. So if you want to improve the health of the ecosystem, to give the necessary services, then biological diversity has to be taken care of. So there are so many case studies. It is available everywhere. There are a lot of beautiful case studies specifically from different continents of the world that one can easily use to problematize the issue. Then we talk about ensuring inclusive and equitable quality educations. So raising awareness of the importance of biological diversity will be an very important step in order to take care of the biological diversity. The children who are going to the school today, the pillars of the nation for tomorrow, the one which will be heading the nation for us in the future, they need to have a very strong knowledge, and they need to have the knowledge which is customarily found in the local area. So in the syllabi making, in the making of the syllabus of the schools, we need to incorporate the environmental science. We need to incorporate the environment of the surrounding. We need to incorporate the environmental history of that particular place. It is in the hands of the young children who are attending the school today that biological diversity can be safely and securely placed. So the next one, we talk about the gender equality and the equitable sharing of the benefits. So biological diversity conventions and the biological sustainable development goal is now recognizing the importance of the biological diversity. Remember, you might be having in your general book writing like this, that Cherrapunji and Mushinaram is the rainiest place in the world. Remember, this rainiest place in the world today, if you go to the local areas, many of the girl children are not attending the schools. Do you know the reason why? It is because many of the girl children are not attending the school, not because there is less of the rainfall, but because of the lack of water for consumption. Many of the tribals living in the hilly regions, they spend a lot of time to fetch the water for the family. And fetching the waters, whether it is in Gwalior, whether it is in Jaipur, whether it is in some part of in any parts of the country, most of the potable water in the home is brought by our mothers, by our sisters. So this particular ladies in the Cherrapunji and Mushinaram is taking a lot of time to fetch the water from the low-lying areas of the hill. And when the water is brought, it's a very tedious, torturous, and then at the same time, to fetch the water, they spend a lot of time and they're unable to attend the school. So when the biological diversity on which the economy is depending is becoming less, then you will take a lot of time to fetch it. You will take a lot of time to collect it, to collect the firewood, to collect the wild fruits, to collect the non-timber forest product. You have to go to the deeper and deeper part of the jungle. Who is going to go there? It is. So there are a lot of cases, not only this, as far as the gender equality and disequality and inequality is concerned. So improvement of the status of biological diversity will definitely be one of the very important steps to bridge this particular gap between the gaps in the gender inequality. So gender equality can be established when biological diversity is sensitively mainstream. Then we talk about ensuring the availability, suitable manners of water and sanitation for all. So many of the communicable diseases are thanks because of the oral fecal routes in the tropical countries like India. So we need a proper source of water. So how are we tapping the river? How are we replenishing the groundwater? How are we using the water? How are we managing the water will be one of the very important steps. And you already know that water, the rainfall, the precipitations, the global climate changes, global warming, erratic rainfall is one way or the other associated with our disregard of the important services of biological diversity. Then we talk about the goal number 7, it's talking about affordable and reliable, sustainable modern energy. We also depend to a great extent on biological diversity. When you are damming the river and generating the potential energy and convert it into the kinetic energy into turbines of the hydroelectric power project is also in one way or the other associated with the proper maintenance of the rivers and tributaries, which again is an example of the biological diversity. And we talk about the goal number 8, promoting a sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all, which is extremely very important. A particular person might be very poor in terms of the bank account, but a particular person might be so contented provided there is a proper forest, proper food in his or her place. So when we talk about ecotourism, for example, you are getting a sustainable source of income by not doing any kind of bad impacts on a particular scenic surrounding places. For myself, I'll be even more contented if given an opportunity to provide a certain kind of a great greeneries forest. Okay? So, for example, a particular farmers might be very, very poor in the neoliberal economy kind of a structure, but a particular poor farmer, seemingly very poor farmer, might be very happy and contented, much more than every one of us if he or she is provided a wooden log cabin house and is living along with the trees and monkeys and snakes that he has been associated in his village. That also has to be known. So when we talk about the development, the question is, are we talking about the American way of development? Are we talking about the development that is associated with my life? Are we talking about the Bhutanese way of development, Nepalese way of development, Indian way of development? That is very important. So biological diversity, only when it is problematized, then only we will be getting the perfect definition of the development. So that also has to be properly given well concern. So building resilient infrastructure. So we have given the examples of those particular mangrove forests. How important are they in terms of safeguarding a particular city or a particular village from the impact of the climatic or the impact of the disastrous environmental conditions? For example, if a city is well provided with a drainage system, if a city is well provided with the proper rivers and tributaries, if the rivers are flowing and is not a clog kind of the ditches, then that particular city will be cleaner, healthier, and more productive. Same is the case if a road is surrounded by the indigenous plants. We know from the road making business that the roads will be more sustainable and will be longer lasting. So infrastructure, in order to be longer lasting, should we think about what we call as green infrastructure. Then we talk about the goal number 10, reducing the inequality within and among the countries. So we have lots and lots of programs. So this particular sustainable development goals and biodiversity can also be discussing in the sync with what we call as IG targets. There are 20 targets that we should be achieving by this particular year. So we talk about the inequality. Suppose the northeastern regions and the Himachal Pradesh villages are giving some of the important Ayurvedic drugs, or the drugs yielding flowers are coming from this particular reasons, and dealers are buying at a very cheap price, and it is given to the pharmaceutical industries. So 1 kilogram of the wild tulsi is only 3,000 rupees in a particular village. But when that particular wild tulsi, the chemicals are extracted and is selling at 300 billion or the $1 million in the pharma market. See the kind of disparity. So the question is, if that particular benefits is shared equitably, I hope there will be sustainable exploitation of the resources, sustainable management of the resources, and also it will help in reducing the gap between the poor rurals and the rich urbans, poor nations and the richer nations, and the poor and technically very challenging nations and the rich and technically sound nations, which is using the pharma products, the raw materials from a particular poor countries, and is being sold again back to them with the higher prices. So these inequalities can be really bridged once we mainstream biological diversity. Now the goal number 11 is about making our cities and human settlements very inclusive. Then we talk about goal number 12 is ensuring the sustainable consumption and production patterns. So it is not about developing great ranches that or the monoculture farms that provide certain raw materials for the McDonald's burgers. Okay, so we should be talking about the permaculture. We should be talking about the crop rotation. We should be talking about organic farming, so on and so forth. and we should be integrating the modern agricultural practices with our traditional cultural practices. So that is the kind of patterns of production that we should be aiming, and we should also be thinking about a sustainable the consumption of the food items. So we have goal number 13 is about taking urgent action to combat the climate change and its impact. So forests has to be taken care of. Many of the so-called wasteland in the law book, like the wetlands, should no longer be considered as a wasteland because they are so important and a rich reservoir of many of the economic activities and the livelihoods that needs to be given priority. Then goal number 14 is about conserving and sustainably using the oceans, seas, and marine resources. Still today, many of the poors in the world is depending directly in the oceanscape for their livelihood. Then we talk about protecting and restoring and promoting sustainable use of the terrestrial ecosystem. So the deserted ecosystem should be aimed towards the conversion of a thriving ecosystem. So that has to be, and this can be easily done without introducing any invasive species, but by realizing the endemic and the indigenous variety to be cultured and to be grown. Those are something that we can start from the schools and colleges. So our college going students, undergraduate students who are having a good knowledge, you should be one of the pioneers in restoring your background, your local areas. So you start asking to the elders of the villages and start asking 80 years ago, 50 years ago, what type of plants, what type of bushes were there. So in this particular open area, can we come out with the plantation of the indigenous variety? It may not be very ornamental, but remember in the coming 30 years, that will be surely saving you from many, many of the environmental disaster. Then the 16th goal is about promoting peaceful and inclusive society. And in the 17th goal, we talk about strengthening the means of implementations and revitalizing the global partnership for sustainable development. So this particular step has already been taken when we have this particular online webinar today. The idea which I used to have, I'm sharing with you. This idea, you all should be. I'm not expecting that all the participants have a time to go there and share this particular gospels or this idea, but at least 1% of you go out and start doing something in a very concrete manner. I think the big game changer is already rooted there. So Mahatma Gandhi has rightly said that let us think globally, but let us act locally. So the action should be local specific, but the thinking should be global. So if everyone in Bijnor started planting and restoring the local and indigenous variety, you have already done a wonderful step to change the world. So that is something. So many of the vulnerable peoples are still living in a very, very fragile ecosystem. And so something that happens in New York is going to change something in in Papua and New Guinea. So that has to be, because in one way or the other we are associated. And we already know that, so what are the challenges? So this year we have seen a lot of wildfire. So every continent we are deforesting, right? And the habitats of the wild animals and plants are shrinking. That is one of the biggest challenges. Many of the biodiversity hotspots are shrinking day by day. So the livelihood is shrinking. Social issues are coming up. Problems of zoonotic diseases. Today we have the pandemic. And you remember this coronavirus, for example, the similar type of this viruses are very prominently found in many of the mammals like pangolins and bats. But this particular disease, even though they are circling among them, it never comes to human. Why it is coming to humans? Because we started going to their habitats for our economic activity, or we started not only consuming them, we started going to their landscape, going to their habitats for our economic activities like cutting trees. And for the first time, we are exposed to them. And for the first time, the virus which was there in this particular region started coming to us. And that is how the dengue virus came to us. That is how many of the parasites jump into humans. So loss of biological diversity is having a very close relationship with the pandemic, with the case of epidemic that we have today. That has to be realized. So biological diversity is having a lot of challenges. So many of the people in the world are living in a very marginalized, but remember these tribals in Indonesia, these particular tribals, thanks because of them that we are still seeing some of the intact ecosystem. So what is their belief? How do they consume? And even though they may not be a PhD scholar like you, even though they may not be a professors and doctors and the students of the great institutions like you, but please remember the experiences, the love of the nature that this group of ethnic group of peoples have, that has to be treasured and that has to be respected. Because the little amount of forest that we see in different parts of the world is because of this indigenous group of people whose life is 100% dependent on the natural wild. So that is the kind of education, that is the kind of mainstreaming that we need to take care of. Last but not the least, I would like to share this particular quote from the beginning of the book written way back in the 19th century by none other than the Charles Dickens in his particular book called as the Tales of Two Cities. It is said that it was the best of time and it was the worst of time. It is the season of darkness and it was a spring of hope. Meaning, today we have an issue like pandemic. Today you are in 21st century. And Shashank Singh Rathore was already thinking about owning a piece of land in the moon. We are talking about challenging, we are sending the rockets, we are trying to occupy the landscape which is there in Venus, which is there in Mars, which is there in Jupiter. We are talking about some of the rockets which will travel so much a distance in the moment. We are talking about the operation of a particular child which is just born, but who is having a defective heart. So open heart surgery on the 6-month-old child. Can you believe 50 years ago, these are some of the unimaginable things that we are able to do today. But at the same time, this is also the time where we are challenged by a tiny virus called as the coronavirus. All our economic activities, all our normals have become abnormal, and we are going to adopt a new normal. So this is also the time, you know, when I was a child, when I was a kid, when I was a student in a particular town called Kapching in Manipur in 1980s, we happen to think that if a particular person is wearing the mask wearing is found only in the Hollywood movie or only in the pictures of the Second World War, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. People are using those particular masks when there's a nuclear holocaust or when there is a Star War. But today, every person is wearing the mask. And if you are not wearing the mask, the police officers in Delhi is catching and you are challan. So these kind of things are happening. And many of those, when we were children, we never had a break in the schools and colleges because of air pollution. But this year and last year, the Delhi government has said that the students are not supposed to go to the school because there is a smog or there is a bad environmental condition. So this is the best of the time where you are doing the cutting edge science. And this is also the worst of time because we are being challenged by some of the dreaded diseases like cancer, some of the dreaded problems like, for example, pandemic and corona that we have. So in this particular context, where is our biological diversity? So if a particular child is relating, there in the picture, you see a particular field. Here there is a rice paddy field. If you are able to connect every single grains of rice is directly associated to the 3rd floor where you are staying. In the 26th floor that I'm staying in Delhi, for example, in the 1st floor that I'm staying in my home in Delhi, on Bijnor or in Manipur, wherever it is, if you are staying there, but if you forget that my life is associated with a single rice grain, which is planted by the farmer in a particular paddy field, and it has taken 6 months to grow, and it has taken pains to grind and come in the form of rice and wheat and chapati in my plate. If you are unable to connect these particular linkages, I think the idea of development, the idea of secured ecosystem, the idea of secured life and a secured future cannot be built. With this, I'm closing my slide presentation, and I will be happy enough to listen questions from you. And thanks again. Thanks, all the credit goes to the team, the technical team, the Sarthak Gupta sir of the Vivek group of colleges. And then I also share my deepest gratitudes to the college team and also to Dr. Meenu Chaudhary, who is the head of Department of the Science. And also I am sharing my humble respect and my prayer to Dr. Tyagi, who allowed me to share something which has been so close to me and which I am working on it. So thank you so much. If there is something wrong during this particular, all the responsibility is from my side, and great apology. And if you could make certain sense out of the presentation, thanks all to the Vivek group of colleges. Thank you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. It is very excellent presentation as well as top. It is impressive, informative, motivated talk, motivation to all. Ajay sir, if you give the permission, we take one or two questions.
Absolutely fine. I will learn from the questions, sir. And we as a teacher will learn from the students and from the questions. No problem. If I know the answer, I will definitely.
Yes, yes. Question number one, an anonymous attendee is asking, is global warming a sustainability issue or not?
I can see, first of all, I can see some of my colleague. I can see on my say, Dr. Smita Bhatia. Ma'am, so happy that you are here, and I learned so many things from you. And it is you who brought me and make me a struggling teacher. Thank you so much, sir. If I understand the question clearly, is it about is the global climate change and warming an issue and biodiversity an issue? Yes, both of them are an issue, and biological diversity, taking care of it, is going to give us an opportunity to challenge the climate change. There are so many things that, which is climate change denier. They said that climate change is just a funny term, and it is not. But remember, we have thousands of scientists without having any without having any kind of personal relationship, is coming out with the findings in a very, very independent manner. That just for example, the levels of ice in the ice cap in the northern pole has reduced. It's not an imaginary thing. The kind of ice cover in the Himalaya which is reduced, this we have seen vividly. And then the coral bleaching that we see in the coral reefs all over the world because of the increasing temperature of the ocean is no longer an imaginary. So climate change is a reality. So climate change is also found to be very much associated to human activities. For example, our industrial activities, predatory agriculture, which is in one way or the other associated with increasing the global warming gases. And that is the reason why maintenance of the forest, plantation activities, which will help in the regulatory services of the ecosystem in a good way, is going to challenge the issue of the climate change. So if I could what to say, link like this, I think I am giving the answers properly. And yes, still, if there is a doubt and there is a queries, we can extend, no doubt. Yes, sir. If there is some other questions, I will be happy to.
Yes, sir. Dr. Smita Bhatia asking,
Yes.
Dr. Ojit, what do you think has been the role of agriculture revolution on biodiversity? I mean the effect of agriculture revolution on the biodiversity. I repeat the question from the ma'am.
Okay.
What do you think has been the role of agriculture revolution on biodiversity?
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Such a wonderful questions and such a tricky and such a very difficult, what to say, to put in one particular ideas or so. Yes, agricultural revolution. When we talk about it, it can be understood and it can be problematized in many aspects. Are we talking about the agricultural revolutions like Green Revolution, which we have seen have used a tremendous amount of pesticide and then tremendous exploitation of the natural resources, which today we realize that that mode of revolution is not very, very sustainable, and we should be talking about the kind of revolution which is at the same time increase the agro-biodiversity, at the same time talk about the sustainable agriculture that people in the tribal region have been doing, how that particular agriculture is developing side by side, the modern tools like genetic improvement of the crop, preservation of the genetic diversity. So we need to integrate now. I will not say now, this is my personal judgment, there might be a lot of personal ethical dilemma, but yes, Tomorrow, if I go out and say that all the modern agriculture should stop and we need to replace with the traditional method, it may lead into a lot of chaos and a lot of poverty and a lot of say non-availability of food items. So what we can think about is the new revolution of the agriculture, where the agro-biodiversity is also protected, where the traditional culture method is also protected, and at the same time, we should be also taking care of the genetic crop improvement, hybridization, and should be coming out with a particular kind of a revolutionary landscape where all these things are integrated in a very sustainable manner. For example, in Kerala and in northeastern region also, we have different varieties of wild varieties of rice. Some varieties are growing in the wetland, very long stem. Some varieties are grown. But today in the Wayanad district of Kerala, many of these traditionally agricultural villages have been converted into monoculture in the form of coffee plantation, in the case of certain kind of, say for example, tea plantation, which reduces the agro-biodiversity, one, and which also associate with a lot of the wild animals and the human conflict. In those particular coffee plantation, lot of elephants are covering, but the tribals which are living in the Wayanad district, they know that what type of crop has to be planted in which season. So we never had that kind of conflict between the humans and wildlife while doing the traditional farming method, but now we have. So today we need an agricultural revolutions where the traditional method, then agro-biodiversity, the genetic improvement, all of them is done in a landscape where sustainable development is imagined and is practiced. But we have already seen from the earlier incidents that the kind of the agricultural revolution that we have seen in the form of green revolution that we see in 70s has not been sustainable, and we see that many of the agricultural field is no longer render arable, and the depletion of the water level, then salinization of the, and at the same time you put a lot of fertilizers and it results into eutrophications. Yeah, so in that context, the kind of earlier revolution needs to be seen with the new tools today. Yes, sir.
Sir, a question come from the Ajay Chetri.
Yes, sir. Yes,
He put some light on concept of green living, that is zero waste.
It may sound very philosophical, but sir, this is very interesting. In the principles, in the principles of ecology, we said that there is no wastage of in nature. This is a particular concept given by a physicist, no doubt. So, for example, a fecal matter in the form of dung materials, dung of cows and buffaloes, is one of the important premium resources for dung beetles. Dung beetles, they collect it and they inject their stings, and I'm talking, they have the ovipositor, they release the eggs inside the dung of the cows and the buffaloes and the elephants, and the young ones develop there by feeding on the cellulose materials which is undigested. So it is the dung materials, so it is no longer useful. But this is one of the very important resources for a certain kind of animals like a dung beetle. A dung beetle's survival is very closely associated with the waste of somebody. So please remember, there is no wastage in life. Same is the case. So in my own family of 5 members, the amount of waste materials means which will no longer be consumed by me is so much. Every morning, a particular one of our friends will come to collect. The municipal van will come and collect, and the dustbin is full of waste materials. If we just think that what are those particular biological wastes which can be again recycled, which can be converted into some kind of vermicompost, and what are those particular cyclable things? If we separate it out and if we recycle it, the waste which we all claim it to be waste is not a waste. It can be a livelihood matter. So one example is in cities, we have two English newspaper, we take it, and after 1 month, kilograms of the paper will be there, and a Radiwala will come and take it out, and we realize that yes, that particular newspaper that we have used and is give us a waste is again one particular materials which is a source of livelihood of somebody. Like this, every waste that come from my home, if we started thinking in that particular, what are the useful, what are the not useful, what are the things that I can do it in my home to reduce and recycle, I think that will be a wonderful. So in my own department, Smita ma'am and Dr. Smita, and we were chatting. Ma'am also does a lot of gardening at home. I'm just giving you the live examples because it might be wrong to quote some other whom I do not know. So so in our own home, we do a lot of recycle, and we think at least about the recycling of the things. So I think that itself is a good step towards the green living and the green. So we need to do plantations in every little space that we have, and we need to also take care of the amount of waste that we generate. And even if the waste is coming, we need to filter out in the source itself what are the things that I can be useful. It can be useful as the bio materials and as the materials for composting, and what are the things that can be recycled, what are the things that I can be given to somebody who doesn't have that kind of a thing. For example, in my own home, I buy a lot of things from Amazon, and the cardboard boxes that I collected, sometimes it becomes so useful, and sometimes it can also be given if you don't want to use it for on, can be given to recyclable or the person who collect the waste paper for recycle. So this is how we can reduce, and this is how we can do from our own home something that will be having an important footprints. Yes.
Sir, an important question at here from MS Manu SM. How do BT crop or GMO affect the biodiversity?
Genetic diversity is something that we need to promote. Here, when we talk about the genetically modified crops in India, at least, this is terminating kind of a thing. GM crops that we have seen so far is terminating to a great extent. That means a farmer is going to buy the seeds from a particular genetical firm, and is going to be planted. And once you plant it, the seeds that you collect, which will be useful for the next cropping, is no longer useful, in the sense it's not going to give that kind of property, that kind of property of defending against the pest. So you have to go back again to a particular shop or a particular firm which sells that particular genetically improved varieties. So in that way, it is causing a lot of cost. Number one, that is, and genetically modified crops, before much of the trials and before much of the study, if it is coming out in the market and we started consuming, we do not know what might be the end result. That is the reason why we say okay to the BT cotton, because it is not directly used for human consumption. But if a particular BT brinjal or the BT tomato comes up, it's directly going to be consumed. We exactly do not know what that particular extra gene will cause in the chemistry and the biology of our body. So we need to have a proper trials. Otherwise, it will be very unethical. For example, Russia has claimed that they have invented a vaccine without much of the trial, when many of the trials are in the third phase, but they say that. So if this particular vaccine is coming okay, then it is good. But if it is not okay, then it will have a boomerang effect. In the sense, some people will not believe in the whole concept of vaccine. So even if we have a good vaccine coming tomorrow, people will stop using it. We said that the polio vaccination is good. That's why the villages children are coming to the vaccination center. But if somebody said the vaccine mein koi farak nahi padta, vaccine is not, then no one will come, and many of our colleagues and we ourselves will be suffering from this. So that same is the case with BT crops. If they are going to be consumed by us, and if it is going to have a bad impact, so it should be not used. And one more thing is BT cotton, if it is growing along with our indigenous variety, okay. But here we are talking about is the corporatization of our agricultural field by a certain variety of BT crops. So monoculture in any kind of, in any agricultural business is absolutely a no-no, because you are growing one particular kind of the crop. BT cotton is protective against the bollworm, but BT cottons might be very vulnerable to the other insects, right? Then it is a problem. But when we talk about the mixed cropping, when we talk about the agroforestry, we know that many of the indigenous variety are also acting as a deterrent to the pests. So any kind of monoculture is not suggested. So BT cotton is good, BT crop is good, but corporatizations and the agriculture activities based on one particular variety is not a good take. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I feel immense pleasure when I pay thanks to you on the behalf of my group of college, the Vivek group of college. Sir, it is a very impressive, very informative, as well as a very technocratic slide presentation it was. Sir, so many pupils, so many students, our students asking about how they prepare this type of the slides and how they present so beautifully and so nicely these presentation are so good, and we and here we also the biodiversity for sustained development, we know the 17 sutra, 17 formula, the end of the poverty and hunger, ensure health, and so many things. We are, this lecture is fully completed the biodiversity and the utility and the what is the applicability of that biodiversity, the knowledge of biodiversity and the knowledge of biology in human beings and human culture development and human welfare. It is really a very wonderful talk. It is a very wonderful webinar. Sir, we feel thanks. At here, I pay a lot of thanks to all personalities who come from this platform, from Delhi and other part of the nation, and that we pay a lot of thanks to the teachers, assistant professor, associate professor, and professors from the different institutions, as well as I am very happy to see that so many students of the CCS University, different colleges of CCS University also join us in this webinar, and they feel satisfaction, they feel a new idea about the presentation, as well as how they use the knowledge of biology in human welfare. It is so good, it is so marvelous. And Dr. Ojit Kumar Singh, sir, we feel a lot of thanks. We feel a lot of gratefulness with you. You give a charming touch to the biology at here.
Oh,
and I am very happy. No, sir, really it is. It's a marvelous presentation. It's the total slides are so good. The total slides are so beautiful. And the several attendees asking to me, are you share these slides to me or to us after the, I asking you, sir, if you please. Then,
why not, sir? I'll share even a better one. I'll try to improve on it, and why not? Because the knowledge increases only by sharing, and we should share. No issue at all, sir.
yes.
Thank you so much.
So, I give a thanks also to Dr. Yogesh Kumar, DAV College, Muzaffarnagar, and Dr. Arya from Dayal Singh College, Delhi, because on this link we meet to you, sir. And please, I here make a request, sir, you further and further, again and again, visit to us, visit on the web platform, and if the possible after the COVID, please, sir, visit the college, visit the institution, and visit the diversified area of the Bijnor. Welcome, sir.
Definitely, sir. I'll surely come and stay with you. Sir, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.